Here's an ordinary presentation clicker. Of course, if you're pre-recording lectures, you might not be using one of these because you can use the keyboard, but some people will want one for accessibility, and some people just prefer the way you can click through slides without having to look down. It can make your presentation more fluid. My clicker's got a forward button and a back button. As always, it's got a button to blank screen, which is sometimes useful, and it's got this button which goes out of the presentation and restarts it from the beginning, which I've never found remotely useful. Wouldn't it be nice if we could reprogram that button to do something helpful, like for instance switch between the two views I showed you in my OBS tutorial? I mean, obviously you can do that. I'm not just wasting your time here. And to understand how, you have to know that the dirty little secret of most clickers is that as far as the computer is concerned, they're nothing more or less than an ordinary wireless keyboard that's only got about 4 keys, which are keys that do something in specifically Microsoft PowerPoint. On my clicker, the forward and back buttons actually press page down and page up, which it turns out take you forwards and backwards through the slides in the same way as the arrow keys. The blank button is actually full stop, or in American English, period. And the other one is a bit unusual because it alternates between sending the escape key to exit the slideshow and function key F5 to restart it. These key mappings are usually hardwired into the clicker. There is no way to change them, and so they are exactly the same as pressing keys on the keyboard. Computer doesn't know, computer doesn't care. You could in principle type all your full stops using the blank screen button if you were so inclined. Using this forbidden mystical knowledge, it should be easy enough to see how to use the clicker with any software that lets you define your own keyboard shortcuts, which would include the ever wonderful OBS. So this is something I covered in my previous video. We have 2 scenes, one called webcam main view and one called main slide heading corner. And I set up a way to switch between them on the settings menu under hotkeys. I have the Z key assigned to one and the X key to the other, so that pressing those 2 keys allows me to do the switch. So all I actually have to do is go back into those settings and change the keys to the clicker's keys. Incidentally, if you're not sure what the key mappings are on your clicker, then this can be an easy way to find out. Simply select an option, press the buttons, and you'll see. So that's page up, page down, blank screen is full stop, and this one toggles between 2 different keys. So I'm going to leave function F5 for main slide heading corner and escape for webcam main view. Having done which, I can switch back and forth between views using the clicker quite naturally. However, when I try to send the slides forwards and backwards, it doesn't work. Why doesn't it work? It doesn't work because PowerPoint has not got the focus. OBS has got the focus. PowerPoint needs the focus, which means I need to click on it, show you that there, in order to give it control of the keyboard input. And you will see now I've done that, these buttons work properly. Now the good news is that OBS, by default, will still let its hotkeys do things even when it hasn't got the focus. So when I press this button, it still changes the view. Unfortunately, we've got the slight problem that PowerPoint, which doesn't know any better, bless it, is still responding to this and thinks that I want to do that, which is not very helpful. So what can we do about that then? Well, some clickers you can reprogram so that they press different keys. This is not one of them. The easiest fix I've found is to use a free piece of software called AutoHotKey to actually remap the keys themselves. So whatever you press, as far as the computer knows, you've pressed something else. So you download this and install it in the usual fashion, but AutoHotKey is not the kind of system where you use an interface to tell it what to do. You have to give it instructions in the form of a little script. Might seem tricky if you're not used to this, but if you just follow what I do, it's straightforward. Now, there are probably cleverer ways of doing this. I'm very new to AutoHotKey, but this is what I came up with. Don't worry about this bit at the top. This is all standard recommended setup that I've just pasted in. You just need to know about these 3 bits here. So the plan is to hijack the escape key and the function F5 key and redirect them to the most bizarre, improbable combination of key presses I could think of. Then set those key presses up as hotkeys in OBS, but don't tell PowerPoint. So these instructions here say every time I press the escape key, I mean hold down Control and Alt and the open square bracket, and then hold that pose for 100 milliseconds, a tenth of a second, and let go. The hold is important for OBS in particular, at least in the current version, because it's notably slow at picking up when you use this method. I found this was a real problem whenever OBS hadn't got the focus when it wasn't the active window, and of course we need PowerPoint to have the focus. So these instructions here do the same for function key F5, except it's remapped to Control and Alt and the close square bracket. I've never come across any software that uses either of those triple key combinations, so even if I open something by mistake and don't notice, my clicker presses are not going to cause trouble. This does mean that I've lost the escape and F5 keys completely. I can't use them in any software as long as I'm running this thing, so just in case I need to get them back in a hurry, I have this bit at the end, which says if I press Control Alt Escape, then the AutoHotKey script will shut down and it will stop messing about with the keyboard altogether. And if you don't fancy typing all that out, I'll put a link to it in the description for this video. So I need to save this with a file name ending in .ahk for AutoHotKey. If you've installed AutoHotKey, then that file will then look like this. And when you double click it, it doesn't look like anything's happened. But we have now applied our AutoHotKey keyboard malarkey. The way to check if it's running is if you go to your Windows system tray, you'll see a little AutoHotKey logo, and if you mouse over, you'll get the file name of the current script. So when I return to OBS, go into the hotkey settings as before. You can see that page up and page down and dot have their usual values. But the other key is now toggling between our 2 obscure combinations. So I set one of them for one scene and the other one for the other. And just to make this clear, it's at the level of the keyboard that this has been remapped. So even if I press the ordinary escape key or the ordinary F5, same difference. So while that AutoHotKey script is running, if I actually go into PowerPoint and try to press function F5, do that until I'm blue in the face, won't do anything in PowerPoint. What it will do, of course, is control the view in OBS. This is actual recorded output from OBS that I'm showing you now. PowerPoint has got the focus, and so I can, at long last, I can go backwards and forwards through the slides and in and out of the presentation using one and the same clicker. So having seen the principle, you can probably spot other opportunities. You could use the clicker to control other software, including, thanks to the beauty of AutoHotKey, software that doesn't let you define your own keys. And you can use the approach to control all sorts of other processes. So one possibility, for instance, is the pausing and unpausing of recordings as a nice quick way to make a fluid video without much editing work, as I discussed in a previous video. So let's have a look at that in OBS. So I'm back on the hotkeys menu. Pause recording and unpause recording are up at the top there. This time, rather than reassign the button of uselessness, I'm going to sacrifice the blank screen button, which, as you will recall, is a dot. There we go. I could, of course, change that using AutoHotKey. You'll notice rather cleverly, OBS has various sensible combinations set up as toggles. So if I choose the same button for pause and unpause, I can just use it to switch between the two. Okay, now let's record a little lecture. Of course, I'm showing you the clicker for illustration. The whole point of this is that in reality, you can be much more unobtrusive. So where shall we start? Let's start with, in this lecture, I'm going to be telling you about the development of the 13th century trebuchet and its relationship to what was I going to be talking about? Oh yes, and its relationship to the development of the reduced instruction set computer in Cambridge in the 1980s. Our story begins... Where does it begin? Our story begins one bright cold day in April in the autumn of I've forgotten what period I'm in. Hang on. I'm going to look that up. Oh yeah. 1227 of the Common Era. So, moving swiftly on, and let's see what happens when we play that back. In this lecture, I'm going to be telling you about the development of the 13th century trebuchet and its relationship to the development of the reduced instruction set computer in Cambridge in the 1980s. Our story begins one bright cold day in April in the autumn of 1227 of the Common Era. Not an award-winning performance by any stretch, but it shows the principle. And of course, you can have one button set up to do the pause and unpause, whilst leaving the other one switching views like that. Although when I tried this, I found it was very difficult to get my head around the two buttons being side by side, doing radically different things. I kept pressing the wrong one. So I have preferred to use the keyboard for one task and the clicker for the other. That works a lot better for me. So I hope that's been useful, and I will leave you with one more bit of OBS plus AutoHotKey magic. This is a version of something from one of my previous videos. I've extended my AutoHotKey script a bit, so it has this extra command, which on seeing a full stop or blank button, not only sends an obscure key press, but waits a second and then sends another one. This, combined with the appropriate hotkey assignments, means that I can do this. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you again soon.